Alright everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today I thought we'd go through a few reading recommendations. I've had a few people asking me about this before, which books I'd recommend for personal finance, trading, psychology, that sort of thing. So I thought I'd go through all that sort of stuff today, as well as give you some honourable mentions that I think maybe don't make it in my top 5 list and maybe not must reads, but I've certainly found some use in reading them, as well as things that I'm going to do, books that I'm going to look at in the future. So this list may change in the future once I've read some of those books, but for now this is how it stands, my top 5 books that I'd look into if you're interested in growing your personal finance knowledge, emotional control, or just looking for some good investing tips and tricks here and there as well. There's tons of information in all these books. Some of them are slightly longer than the others, so I'll make a note of the duration of the books, how easy they are to read, and explain a little bit about the books as we go. Just very quickly before we get started, I've changed the microphone that I use here. I know it was a little bit quiet on the last video. Let me know how this sounds. If it still doesn't sound exactly how I want, what I'll do is I'll get a new microphone. This is all like trial and error. Still learning all the editing things, looking at all the post-production things as well. So just bear with me. The production value will go up, I promise you that. Okay, so into the first couple of books that I've got. The first book that I'd recommend people to read if they are interested in personal finance, growing wealth, and looking at how money actually works is this book here. So we've got Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This is like baby's first book into personal finance. I think most people probably have read this one before, or at least have heard of it. This is probably the most popular book in the genre, and it stood the test of time. It's written about 25 years ago, I think, at least. So you can see here I've actually got the 20th anniversary edition, going into basically how to think of yourself more as the employer rather than the employee role. So getting out that 9 to 5, what you can do in your spare time if you are working in 9 to 5, how to gather the skills that you need to build your own personal finance journey. There's some really good, interesting points in here. What I particularly like about it is there's worksheets to do in this book. So if I can just find one. At the end of every chapter, you can think of it as a workbook. It'll ask you what the chapter was about. What do you think the author meant by saying something? And it actually gives you space here on the pages. I don't know if you can see that, we'll let the camera focus, to actually write your own notes in the book, which I think is very helpful. It's definitely a book that I would go into with the mindset that you are going to study it. The one thing I will say about this book is the difference between taking the physical copy of the book, being able to write in the book, and listening to the audio book is massive. There's certain books where I think you can get away with having the audio book on in the background. It saves you time, it lets you do it while you're doing something else. But Rich Dad Poor Dad is definitely one of the books that I would recommend getting a physical copy. Sit down with a pen and paper, really think about what you're doing, take the chapters slowly, don't be afraid to reread it. I've read this book 3 times already. I'll probably read it again because I do think that there is some really good information, really good ways to frame your mindset, and some fantastic stuff to start on this kind of journey. The only couple of downsides that I really see about this is it is very beginner, it's very basic. If you're looking for specifics in your niche, if that's trading, if that's investing in real estate, if it's investing in stocks, there isn't too much specifics about that, but that's not really what the book's trying to be. It's trying to get you to think about how you can look at yourself more so as that kind of investor rather than an employee. That's probably the first book that I'd recommend to read if you haven't read it already. The next book that I have is actually an audio book, so I'll just put a little graphic of the book on the screen here, and that is Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits, I think, is probably the best book that you can read on the sort of organization mentality side of things, where you can really drill down into how to form these great habits that are going to support you throughout your career. So it's okay being motivated to do something every now and again, and anybody can do things when they're easy to do, but to really form your habits and to make those changes last, whether it's going to the gym, starting a business, learning a new skill like playing the piano or learning a language, anything, it can basically apply to every kind of aspect of life that you want to get better at. There's chapters on parenting, there's information on, as I say, how to grow a business, how to learn a skill, and it's very generalized. I think it's something that's fantastic for trading because it teaches you these habits and, you know, how to form this repetition to make it just part of your life seamlessly. So there's plenty of lessons to take through that. As I said, I've done this one with the audiobook. This is another one that I probably recommend getting a physical copy just to reread. Next time I want to go through it, I'll probably go through it with the physical copy. It's fantastic as an audiobook, but some of these books you really do want to study rather than have on in the background. I really have nothing bad to say about Atomic Habits. It really does help you in every facet of life. There's other books in the same vein, in the same genre, but this one I think is the most popular, and I think it's the most popular for a reason. fantastic information, and that one's by James Clear. So the third book that I'd recommend is actually a trading specific book. So I am going to keep this specific to trading as much as I can. I know that's why most people are watching this channel. Again, I've done this one on audiobooks. I don't have a physical copy to show you, so again, I'll put the graphic up on screen. And this is Trading for a Living by Alexander Elder. If you've heard of Mark Douglas and the trading psychology side of things from Mark Douglas, I think Alexander Elder does a really fantastic job of condensing that down to a book about a quarter of the size. It is a little bit dated as far as his trading method and stuff like that. The strategy that he uses in there is a very slow swing trading strategy, so a little bit different to how I like to trade, but it is some fantastic information on there as psychology, knowing how the market moves. If you don't really understand how markets move, that's a fantastic book to get started with. It's very easily digestible. The audiobook I think was about 2.5 hours. The physical book is obviously going to be a little bit shorter as well if you want to read that. The problem that I have with Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas is it's a little bit long-winded, it's a little bit repetitive, and there's no information in there that you don't get from trading for a living. I think it's a really nice one to get started with if you want to read a trading book, because let's be honest, they're not the most riveting books to read if you're looking at strategies, you're looking at how the market moves and stuff like that. So it is very digestible. You can do that quite easily. Again, you can study the book, you can take some paper, write things down. I did it on the audiobook, and I don't think I'd get much more from making notes of it unless you were that sort of a reader. As a kind of light listen on an audiobook, maybe you put it on the way to work, on the bus or something like that, I think Alexander Elder's Trading for a Living is a fantastic, easily digestible trading book. The fourth book, again, audiobook for me, so I don't actually have the physical copy, but I'll put it up on screen again, is I Know What to Do, So Why Don't I Do It by Nick Hall. This book was one of the first books that I read when I started to take trading really seriously, and it's a fantastic book which kind of helps you with the procrastination side and the longevity side of trading. Lots of people wipe out from trading because it's massively emotionally and psychologically demanding job to have. The thing that I like about this book is it really brings that into focus. Teaches you how to manage the stress, teaches you how to manage the calm, how to look after yourself. If you struggle with getting stressed at the charts, or you come home and you're super stressed from work and you jump on the charts, you don't want to do it, you don't want to do the back testing, everything else like that, this is a fantastic read to really secure your mentality. It's not the sort of mentality and psychology book which says you're going to read it, you're going to be motivated for an hour, you're going to do some work, and then tomorrow you're going to hate doing whatever you're doing again. If you're working your 9 to 5 and then you come home, you do 3 hours trading, and then you do an hour of back testing, and then you do your advanced self-review, and you don't get to see anyone, you don't get to do anything, it's not sustainable. Okay, you trade to have this lifestyle that you want to have. The only reason you would ever get into trading is because the hourly rate is phenomenal compared to anything else, okay? It's not something that you do to take lightly. It's not a hobby. Yes, you might enjoy trading, but at the end of the day, there's an end goal for that. If it's unsustainable, you'll never reach that end goal. You'll never be able to get to the point where you think, okay, I'm content here, I'm happy in the position that I'm in. If it's completely unsustainable, massively stressful, you don't know what you're doing, you feel lazy because you're not doing something, but you can't do something because you're burnt out and you hate it. So I think this is a fantastic book for mentality side of things. Now, you have to apply that to trading. All these books I would probably study if that's how you learn. Take some paper, write some notes, think about how you can actually apply that to trading. There is some things in this book that I don't necessarily agree with. There's a little bit of, let's say, unproven science in this book, but 90% is pretty much spot on. I think the author's done a really good job of kind of interlinking a lot of his lectures into this, interlinking a lot of his research. And this one, again, is by Nick Hall. So I definitely recommend giving that one a read if you're struggling to picture your journey in trading, or where you want to be, but you're struggling along that journey right now. The fifth book that I've got on this list is probably a little bit polarizing, and it's 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Love him or hate him, I know a lot of people don't agree with what he says. There's certain things that I don't agree with what he says as well. However, the book is like a nice guideline of things that kind of should be done properly, okay? The important thing to note is even Jordan Peterson himself has said that these are rules that he tries to implement in his own life, but there's times that he falters from them. You don't have to follow everything in this book to the letter, but it does put things nicely into perspective. Some of the lessons that I found were good were the ones that I read the chapter and then I looked at how to apply it to me. Not every rule is exactly as it should be because he's written it from his personal experience, but if you can relate that to your own personal experience, I think that there's some really good stuff in there. As I say, a little bit of a polarizing author, but I think that there's definitely something to learn for most people from that book. I'm going to go into a few honourable mentions as well now that which didn't make the top 5 of my reading recommendations, but these are things that I think you will get some value out of, but maybe just not as much as the other 5. I think the top 5, there's a good kind of mixture of different types of books to work on different things. There's Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is your introduction to personal finance, your Atomic Habits, which forms the basis of a lot of things, how to do things efficiently, how to make yourself do things, whether that's go to the gym, whatever. Overall, very good for kind of a lifestyle. Trading for a Living, which is obviously a trading specific book. I know what to do, so why don't I do it? That's a really good book for looking at things long term, I think, understanding why you're doing things, understand how your body works, and really nice for if you're really stressed at the minute and you want to really just dig into that. 12 Rules for Life, again, a nice set of rules for everything, but these ones, the honourable mentions that I have is Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas. I already mentioned that book when I was talking about Trading for a Living. It's a little bit long-winded, it's a little bit repetitive. Mark Douglas does a fantastic lecture on YouTube, which is I think about an hour and a half long, and you can get the gist of what he's saying from that lecture. There is some interesting things in this book, so if you do want to read it, feel free to, but a little bit long for me. The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, which I do actually have a physical copy of. Again, looking at personal finance, investments. This is not trading, but if you're looking to grow wealth in the long term, you're looking at what assets to buy, how to analyze markets. This book was written a long time ago. The revised edition has quite a lot of notes from Warren Buffett, so that kind of tells you all you need to know about The Intelligent Investor. And the last honourable mention is The Art of War. Now, I put this as an honourable mention and not in my top 5 because I haven't actually finished it yet. I'm about 80% of the way through. I haven't really had a chance to reflect on it. This would potentially make it into my top 5 after I've reflected on it, after I've done some study on it, and after I've actually finished the book. So I felt like I couldn't really put it in my top 5 considering I haven't quite finished it yet. So they would be my kind of top 5 books, 3 that I think would be fantastic to read as well. There's nothing too fringe out there on this list. I think some people may have heard or read all these books anywhere. So I'm going to give a few future reads that I'm going to look to do if this list changes in a year because I found something that's been particularly helpful for me. I'll maybe redo this list or something like that, or change the order of them slightly. So the first book that I'll be looking to read in the future is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I'm really looking forward to reading that book. I think there's a lot that many people could learn from David Goggins, just how to grind through things, do the things that you don't want to do, just get your head down and do it. That can apply to a lot of things. If you don't know David Goggins' story, I would definitely suggest you go give yourself an afternoon to go research that, look on YouTube, see what he managed to do and what people are actually capable of. So I'll be interested to read that one. The next book that I'll be looking to read is Becoming the 0.1%. This is a book written by a former Marine, which really interests me. So again, I'm along the same veins as the David Goggins book, really what we can achieve if we really put ourselves to it. These are like maybe motivational books. As I say, I haven't read them, I haven't really looked into them too much, but they are things that I definitely want on my radar. And the last one is The Compound Effect. I've heard really good things about this book, so I'm definitely excited to look into these books as well. I'll maybe do a little review of these in the future as well. If my list changes, I will let you know. But yeah, something important that I'd like to say as well is that if you're looking for a book to give you the edge over everything else, a lot of people say, oh, what book did you read to become profitable? Or what book did you read to learn trading? There isn't a book that's going to make you profitable. There isn't a book in the world that's going to make you a profitable trader. There's information to take from these books, but you've got to remember that these authors and these books were written based on the author's experience. If you have had a slightly different experience, you might be trading completely differently to Mark Douglas. That doesn't mean that if you don't trade like Mark Douglas, you won't be profitable. There's information in these books. Take it and apply it to your own life. You don't have to read everything as gospel. The 12 Rules for Life, fantastic. There's really good information in there. However, I don't apply every single rule there to the T to my life. I live a completely different life to Jordan Peterson, as I do to David Goggins, as I do to any of these authors on this list. If you are looking for the kind of like golden goose of finding that perfect book that's gonna, oh, my mentality is perfect now and I'll never fall into FOMO again because I've read Trading in the Zone, it just doesn't work like that. You can read as many books as you like, you've got to actually put the kind of hours in, you've got to take the losses, you've got to settle your mentality, and it's something that many traders constantly struggle with. I'd say it's probably about 80% of trading is working on your mentality. You can be profitable all day long, but all it takes is one day to take 10 losses in a row and then that's it, it's gone. And understanding when to call it a day, what your entry criteria looks like, where you're taking your position off, even if it's different to somebody else. One of the kind of things that I think a lot of people do and really delays their trading career, and myself included, is they compare themselves to other traders. Somebody took this trade and they made 10%. I took this trade and I only made 1% today. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a worse trader. It's just sometimes you'll have the edge, sometimes somebody else will have the edge. All that matters is in the long run, how does it go? Is it consistent? Okay, so that's my list of top 5 books. Thank you, Jacob, for asking. In the comments, I've had a lot of other people ask me for this in our Discord as well. I just thought I'd make a little video here. Alright, legends, thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon.